Well, go on, everybody. Lennox here from Simple123 Trader. This is the weekly playbook for February 7th to 12th. And I'm hoping everybody is doing well and are safe at home. I'm going to start off by answering a question that was posed to me by one of our members. And that question was, how does the weekly outlook videos of each of the futures help with trading in the Forex market during the week. And to answer that, I will kind of explain as I'm going along. However, in a nutshell, you want to take a look at the bigger picture of what's going in the futures in order to understand what was more than likely going to happen as the week plays out. So again, we're just looking at one bar on the weekly time frame to kind of make a judgment and say, okay, we think this bar is going to be going up, or it's going to be staying the same, or it's going to be going down. There's only basically three conditions that it can have. So we're just basically based on past movements, looking at what's the probable outcome for the current weekly bar. All right, so I usually start off on the monthly just to get an idea. So let me just get rid of that there. Okay, so here we go. So for the first one, we're looking at Australian dollar. And last week, the expectation was for a little bit of a pullback in the Australian dollar. It did that. And reason why is because we've come and reached the very first area of resistance. We got a red candle signaling a little bit of a pause. However, it's it is the weekly that we're interested in. We know now that we hit a resistance. We got a little pullback. So the expectation now going into this week is that we should push with the current bar to the upside, heading back up to resistance. Okay, so that would be the take for the Australian dollar. So how does that help you when you're trading the Forex? Well, if you know the Australian dollar has strength going into this week, then you would want to be looking at that in relationship to the US dollar, for instance, and that will be the key catalyst to help you decide whether or not you want to continue going long or staying out or going short with the Australian dollar. So right now, like I said, we had a pullback, came back down into previous support zone, and it's a zone. It's an area, okay? And we pull back into that area, and now we're getting a push back out. So my expectation is for price to challenge the top resistance area again, pushing into this week. So strength in the Australian dollar going forward, and after it reaches this area, of course, it'll be a totally different thing. We'll get a pullback and then a continuation again. But in the interim, right now, what we're worried about and concerned about is what's happening this week. So our expectation for this week is a move to the upside. Okay. So that is the Australian dollar. So we can confirm this by looking at the US dollar, which we'll get to. Okay, so when we get to the US dollar, we'll see if that's so. If the Australian dollar has strength, then we would expect the US dollar to have a little bit of weakness. That's especially so with the euro. When we look at the euro futures, if the euro futures are strong, then we would expect a weak US dollar. All right, so let's continue and we look at Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has had quite the push, of course, on the monthly, on the weekly. We had a pullback similar to what we just looked at in the Australian dollar. We reached a support area, and on the weekly, we would expect continuation of this move to the upside. So looking at it on a daily and a finer level, I'm expecting further moves to the upside based on the current pattern. So again, reaching for the top, reaching for resistance area, we'll hit resistance. We probably get some kind of gyration in here before we go again, but that's the likely scenario for this week, some more strength in Bitcoin going forward. Okay, let's take a look at crude oil. Crude oil also looking very strong. Huge push to the upside. We are, of course, at a very strong resistance area right here, and we're touching it. But it looks like on the monthly that we should be slicing through back up to previous resistance here. Okay, so dropping to the weekly, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a big push to the upside. We're coming up to resistance, but we still have room to continue the onslaught up. So looking for strength in the crude oil going into this week as well. Okay, so we are very high up on this move. So care has to be taken. We are reaching near the end of this move in the short term at least. So, but right now again, upward move for crude oil. Let's take a look at the Canadian dollar on the monthly. Okay, so Canadian dollar has had quite a run, but it too on the monthly has come within the very earshot of previous resistance area, and is still looking pretty strong after a little pullback. So on the weekly, we had a little pullback, and similar to the Australian dollar and so forth. Again, looking that pullback, we could have one more push back up to resistance again going into this week. Okay, so on the daily time frame, we see this a little closer. So a pullback down to support area, and now we are again looking to push to the upside. Now, are we gonna make it and break it through here? Probably not. We'll probably just get up to this area, maybe not even all the way up, but looks like we should be pushing with strength with the Canadian dollar to the upside. Of course, worst case scenario here, and this is actually heading down one more time to challenge this area. But looking at it right now, it looks like we have a little bit of strength going into the session for this week. All right, let's take a look at the US dollar. So on the monthly. All right, so we have had quite the push down on the monthly time frame. We've come very close to the previous support zone where we touched into it. We got a little bounce. So is that bounce legit and we're going to continue going up? That's the key takeaway now. So quite the move to the downside into support. Now we bounced. Are we going to continue? I don't think so. I think that we're going to be heading back down one more time. So looking at back at the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, the Canadian dollar, would be going with the U.S. dollar to the downside. So if the U.S. dollar starts to fall, it is possible for the Canadian dollar to go with it. If the Australian dollar, the euro, the GBP, and the New Zealand against the US dollar would be going the opposite way to the upside. Okay, so the USD CAD, USD Swiss, USD Japanese yen would be heading to the downside, maybe even gold as well. All right, so the expectation here on the weekly is for a turn to the downside. So let's see how it looks on the daily. And on the daily, looking like maybe we have come to that area where we might be done, that little move to the upside, and we could be heading back down this week. Okay, so a little bit of weakness going into the week with the US dollar. So let's take a look at the euro. So the euro, which should be going the opposite way. So going to the monthly, we've had quite the push, and again we hit resistance area, and we were turned back. But now are we going to get some strength going into this week? Still a bit weak here, so let's get a little closer look. Still a bit weak. However, we might have completed our move to the downside to this support area. We could get a bounce here and push back up this week. So if the US dollar continues its move to the downside, then we would expect the euro to push to the upside. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the Swiss franc on the monthly. Swiss franc has had quite the run as well, but now it's had a big pullback on the weekly. That pullback might be done here as well. So what are we looking at for this week? Okay, so we had again quite a pullback back down to a previous support zone, and now we're looking like we want to bounce. Is it a legitimate bounce? Maybe, maybe not. It might just be a half baked move to the upside and then a continuation to the downside. But in the short term, a little bit of strength in the Swiss franc, but it might be over, especially US dollar heading down. We would expect the Swiss franc to fall with it. Okay, let's take a look at gold. Gold also has had quite a run, but quite the pullback. On the weekly, where we've been in this challenging area where it's just been a battle and not much going on. We've come to this area. Are we going to turn and continue up, or are we going to continue down? Is the key question here. So we could lengthen our area here, and it looks like we're heading to the downside still. So a breach of this level here on the weekly, and we're heading down. Otherwise, we're heading up. But right now, it's looking a bit indecisive. So on the daily, let's take a look at that, and you can see it's very choppy. We're down at a support area, looking to bounce. Are we done? Maybe not. We might still have another push back down. That would coincide with a weak US dollar. We probably get a little bit of weakness in gold as well. Okay, so looking for that to slide back down before I see any move to the upside for gold. Let's take a look at the Japanese yen. So how does this help you when you're trading? If you know what's going on with the US dollar, it will really help you with the major pairs. Okay, Japanese yen, but you can see very choppy. It took up quite the pullback here over the last couple of months. Quite the pullback indeed, and down into a previous support area. And is it ready to turn around at this point? Maybe so. We've got quite the pin bar there, so this could bode well for a move to the upside for the Japanese yen. However, we're looking at a weak US dollar, so if we get a weak US dollar, we might continue back down one more time before we get that move back up. Okay, so a little bit of a tough area right now. We could get, like I say, a quick push to the upside, maybe in the short term, but overall it still looks a little bit on the weak side here. Let's take a look at the New Zealand dollar. It should be similar to the Aussie. Very strong push, back up to resistance. And are we ready to turn around and come back down, or are we still going to go to the upside? Go to the weekly. On the weekly, still looks very strong. Although it's been going up for quite a while, so we might be getting exhausted. And we had a pullback, and it's still looking like we want to push to the upside, but we have resistance here. So certainly some push to the upside for the week, but it could be short-lived. Okay, let's take a look at the Mexican peso on the monthly. Mexican peso has had quite the run to the upside as well, and looks like it's just took a little breather, and quite the move, taking a little breather on the daily. Yes, that breather may be done. We hit some support area, and now we're pushing again to the upside. So looking pretty good here for continued move for the Mexican peso to the upside against a weak US dollar. Okay, let's take a look at the British pound. So British pound also has had quite the run, and it still looks very strong. We're coming into resistance now, into that big resistance zone here, and still looks very strong, like we have lots of room for this to go. So on the weekly, British pound still pounding along, and on the daily, still pushing. A little bit of a pullback last week as expected. Now we have a nice pin bar there, and it's looking to push, but we're right at resistance. So it's either going to slice through or pull back dramatically before it goes. So one or the other here. Which one is it going to be? Right now, again, we're right at resistance. So indeed, we could get a pullback first before we go, but right now looking lots of strength right there in the British pound to continue its assault to the upside. Okay, let's take a look at the at silver. So silver in the last little bit has had quite the push. So we had a pullback. And then in the last 4 months, we've had quite the move to the upside. On the weekly, very strong move to the upside. And so coming into this week, are we still going to push to the upside? So you can see what happened. Quite the big move, big drop back down, and we're bouncing again. So it looks like we're going to continue back up. And how long? Not certain, but strength going into this week with silver, at least in the short term. Okay, I'll take a look at the Russell 2000, and this stock index has had quite the run, and still looks very strong, like nothing can get in its way. Although this is pretty straight up in the air, so I'm a bit concerned now because it's pretty straight up in the air. We might be getting to the point where we would be looking for some kind of choppiness to start occurring, but it's very strong, and earnings have been quite buoyant, and so things are still looking pretty good here. Traders are looking for stimulus package, bankers and so forth, to help them going forward with all this COVID stuff, and so this is boding well for the stock market overall, and looking strong for US 2000. Again, after such a move here, we could get a little bit of a pullback, but again, continued move to the upside is in the forecast for that. The Dow also very strong. You can see again, not looking like it wants to stop, reaching new highs, and just keeps going to the upside. So I'm not betting against it. It's still very strong. Yes, we could get from this move, we could get a pullback first before it goes, but continued strength overall. Even if we get a pullback, it's an opportunity to jump back in and buy as the government helps with stimulus packaging and so forth. And again, the earnings are a big catalyst in this. Now, US 500, same kind of thing, breaking to new highs again last week, and so that's on the daily. So on the monthly time frame, we've been very, very strong to the upside here, and on the weekly, still pushing to the upside. Even though we get a little lull, a little pullback here, it's just a little bit of a lull before we continue the move, and it's just doing that as well. So again, possibility of a pullback, but again, overall push to the upside for the US 500. The technology sector, the US technology sector, also similar pattern, very, very strong on the weekly, still pushing to the upside on the daily, not getting in its way. Again, we could get a small pullback, but overall opportunity. If it pulls back, it's an opportunity for buying to continue the move to the upside. Right now, it just looks very strong. So that's a look at what's setting up for this week. So pay attention to the US dollar if you're playing the majors, and profitable trading to everyone. Be safe. We're done now. Thank you.